God operates beyond our clock. He doesn't rush when we panic, and He doesn't hesitate when we feel unprepared. He moves when the stage is set, even if we can't yet see the curtain about to rise. The truth is, what appears as a surprise in your life has already passed through divine planning. He's the master architect, designing the foundation of your next season while you've been busy surviving your current one. You might feel stuck, but God has already orchestrated your exit. You may feel forgotten, but heaven has already finalized your promotion. God's sudden moves are surgical, sharp, precise, and targeted. He knows exactly what to remove, what to shift, what to reveal, and what to restore. He's not trying to guess what's best for you. He knows what is best for you. His sudden move is not a shift born from crisis, but a release birthed from foreknowledge. This is not reactionary movement. It's revelatory execution. While you're walking by faith, He's working from fulfillment. He already knows the end from the beginning, and when the moment is right, He moves. Often we're caught off guard because our human perspective is bound by time. We measure life in days and years, but God measures it in seasons and purpose. That's why He doesn't need to consult your history to determine your future. Your past does not intimidate Him, and your present does not limit Him. His timing is sovereign. If He moves suddenly, it's not to create chaos, but to create clarity. It's not to throw you off balance, but to place you in position. When He moves, it may feel like disruption, but it's actually divine alignment. Think about how nature reflects this. A seed buried underground doesn't show signs of life for weeks. It's hidden, developing roots, growing in the dark. But one day, without warning, it breaks through the soil. The growth didn't start that day, it appeared that day. In the same way, God's move in your life may seem sudden, but He's been developing it underneath the surface for a long time. Your obedience, your faithfulness, your silent endurance, none of it has been in vain. What's been incubating in private is about to manifest in public, and it will be so strategic, so timely, that only God could get the credit. Sometimes God hides the how, because if we saw the full blueprint, we might interfere with the process. We'd try to fix what He's already resolved. We'd rush what He's still preparing. That's why He moves in ways that feel sudden. He protects us from prematurely engaging with what requires divine timing. His sudden moves are shields of mercy as much as they are acts of breakthrough. He conceals the details to preserve the outcome. When God's sudden move enters your life, everything attached to delay must let go. Doors that have been closed will swing open, not because you knocked louder, but because He touched the hinges. Hearts that were hardened will soften, not because you convinced them, but because He spoke to them. Opportunities you didn't apply for will chase you down, not because of your qualifications, but because of your positioning under His favor. This kind of shift is not earned, it's appointed. And once it's time, no devil in hell and no system on earth can block it. The precision of God's movement is also seen in how He weaves people, moments, and even obstacles into your journey. What the enemy meant to use as a barrier, God will use as a bridge. What felt like rejection was redirection. What looked like a detour was actually the main road. He's not just moving you to a new place, He's moving through you to accomplish His purpose. You are not a pawn in this story. You're a key character in a divine narrative authored by the Creator Himself. And so, when God makes a sudden move in your life, it's not random. It's the release of something that has been held in place by divine timing. It's the manifestation of promises planted long ago. It's the arrival of what heaven has been orchestrating in silence. What felt like waiting was really preparation. What felt like stillness was the tension before the breakthrough. And when it happens, you'll realize God was never late. He was exact. He was intentional. He was precise. And what looked sudden to man was always scheduled by God. Delay does not mean denial. And in the realm of God, silence never equates to absence. When heaven delays, it's not because the answer was rejected, it's because the answer is being refined. Many people mistake divine waiting as a sign that God has changed His mind or forgotten His promise. But the truth is, Delay is often the sacred space where character is formed, faith is tested, and purpose is matured. It is not a punishment, it is preparation. God is not withholding the blessing to deprive you. He's perfecting the environment into which that blessing will arrive. You see, when God speaks a word over your life, it doesn't always come to pass instantly. There is often a divine gap between the promise and the manifestation. That gap is where most people grow weary, give up, or walk away. But those who understand the nature of God know that the delay is where the depth of your destiny is dug. The longer it seems to take, the stronger your spiritual roots are becoming. God is not interested in giving you something that will collapse under pressure. He wants to give you something that will last, that will stand, that will carry weight in eternity. And that kind of blessing takes time to develop. Sometimes God allows delay to detox your motives. He waits because He knows your hands are not yet ready to hold what your heart desires. He waits because He knows the people currently around you cannot handle the version of you that is coming. He waits because He's protecting the blessing from being planted in immature soil. Delay is not the enemy. It's the evidence that God cares too much to deliver something halfway. He's a finisher. When He does it, it will be whole. When He opens the door, it will be the right one. When He makes the move, it will be unstoppable. Delay also reveals the depth of your faith. Anyone can trust God when the answer is quick, when the door opens fast, when the breakthrough is instant. But real faith is forged in the furnace of waiting. Real faith is when you keep believing even when there is no sign of change. It's when you keep praising even when the promise feels distant. It's when you stay faithful even when the silence feels heavy. God is not only watching what you say while you wait. He's watching how you walk while you wait. Will you still serve when the miracle is delayed? Will you still love when the answer is postponed? That kind of faith captures heaven's attention. The enemy wants you to misinterpret the delay. He whispers that God forgot. He tries to convince you that it's over, that the window has closed, that the moment has passed. But the enemy is always a liar. What looks like inactivity is often divine strategy. What appears stagnant is sacred stillness. The delay is not evidence of God's neglect. It's proof of His precision. He's aligning timing, people, places, and situations to converge perfectly. He's orchestrating your life like a symphony, and every moment of waiting is a note that adds to the beauty of the final song. In the delay, God is also building your dependence. He wants to be sure that when the blessing arrives, your heart is anchored in Him, not in the breakthrough itself. He doesn't just want you to receive the gift. He wants you to be transformed by the process. That's why the waiting season is holy. It stretches you. It humbles you. It prunes you. It breaks your reliance on yourself and pushes you into deeper intimacy with the one who is truly in control. In the delay, you stop striving and start surrendering. And that surrender is what positions you to receive what is coming. God is not in a rush, but He is always on time. He knows the exact moment when your preparation will meet your promise. And when that moment comes, everything that felt stuck will suddenly start to shift. The doors will open without force. The opportunities will flow without manipulation. The connections will align without effort. You won't have to chase it. It will locate you. Because when God says it's time, nothing can stand in the way. But until then, the delay is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is your refiner. It is the evidence that God loves you too much to let you walk into destiny unprepared. So don't curse the delay. Don't despise the season where nothing seems to be happening. Don't let impatience rob you of what's being developed. The very thing you've been waiting for is being constructed piece by piece behind the veil of time. And when it finally appears, it will be clear that the delay was not denial, it was divine design. God has never failed in timing, and this time will be no different. God has a rhythm that defies logic. His movements are often disguised in ordinary moments, yet they carry extraordinary impact. One of the most powerful patterns in Scripture is that God often operates through the element of surprise. When he's about to shift someone's life, he doesn't always give advance notice. He specializes in sudden transformational moments that break cycles, cancel limitations, and realign destinies in an instant. And this isn't just a poetic notion. It's a divine principle echoed in the stories of people like Joseph, Ruth, and the disciples. They lived through what felt like mundane or even painful seasons, only to be launched into purpose overnight. Joseph went from the pit to the palace not by slow progress, but by divine acceleration. For years, it looked like his dreams were buried under betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. His life seemed to be moving in reverse. He had every reason to question God's promise, to assume that the delay had turned into denial. But in one sudden moment, Pharaoh called for him. One unexpected conversation took him from being forgotten to being favored. He woke up that day a prisoner, but by nightfall he was second in command of a nation. That's what happens when God decides it's time. No system, no man, no lie, and no label can stand in the way of his move. Ruth's story paints the same picture from a different angle. She was a widow, a foreigner, and a woman in a society that had little space for any of those labels. Her life could have been defined by lack, loneliness, and obscurity. But in her faithfulness to serve Naomi and gather leftover grain in a field, God was setting her up for a sudden shift. One day, she was gathering behind the workers, and the next she was marrying the owner of the field. She wasn't looking for status, she was walking in obedience. And while she walked, heaven was orchestrating a divine connection that would not only bless her life, but place her in the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. That is the beauty of divine suddenlies. They are never just about you. They ripple across generations. Then there were the disciples stuck in a storm, fearing for their lives, battling the wind and the waves in the darkness of night. They had no idea that Jesus was on his way, walking on water toward their chaos. They didn't expect him to show up in that way. They were bracing for defeat, but heaven was planning deliverance. In the very place of fear, a sudden divine visitation changed everything. The storm did not last, the fear did not win, and their faith was never the same again. That's how God works. He steps into the impossible just when you think all is lost and shifts the entire atmosphere with one word. These stories are not just history. They are patterns, living blueprints of how God operates when he wants to make a statement in someone's life. He waits until the conditions look least favorable. He waits until your strength is exhausted, your resources have run dry, your options are gone. And just when everyone else has written you off, he steps in and does the unimaginable. Not because you earned it, but because it was appointed. Not because it makes sense, but because it's supernatural. God loves to move suddenly because it glorifies him completely. When a change is slow and expected, people can take credit. They can point to effort, connections, or qualifications. But when it's sudden, when it's radical, shocking, and undeniably divine, only God can be praised. That's why some doors didn't open before. That's why certain relationships ended. That's why you felt stuck when you thought you should be soaring. He was preserving the moment so that when the shift came, there would be no confusion about where it came from. Sometimes the sudden shift doesn't just change your location, it changes your identity. It redefines how people see you and how you see yourself. It brings hidden gifts to the surface, exposes the lies that tried to limit you, and reveals the real reason you survived the previous season. God never wastes a struggle, and he never wastes a wait. What you walked through was not in vain. It was part of the setup for the sudden shift. And when that shift happens, it doesn't ask for permission. It establishes a new season without delay. So don't misread the silence. Don't mistake the waiting as wasted. You may not see any sign right now, but the God who moved for Joseph, Ruth, and the disciples is the same God who is watching over your journey. He hasn't forgotten you. In fact, he's closer than ever. And when he decides the time is right, what took others years will take you moments. What seemed impossible will suddenly become your reality. That is the nature of divine intervention. It doesn't knock. It arrives, it doesn't hint, it declares, and when it shows up, everything changes instantly. One divine move from God carries more weight than a lifetime of effort. You could labor for years, striving to build, trying to fix, waiting to be noticed. But when God decides to move, everything can change in a moment. It doesn't take him decades to restore what you lost. He doesn't need time to open doors, create opportunities, or elevate your name. He can do in one instant what generations couldn't accomplish. That's the power of a divine move. It overrides time, human strategy, and natural laws. It silences every voice of doubt and disarms every limitation that tried to keep you bound. We are conditioned to think in terms of process, as if every blessing must be earned through a long, painful climb. But God is not confined to our formulas. He doesn't operate by human logic. He's not restricted by the length of your suffering or the rules of this world. When he decides to move, it won't be because you finally became qualified. It will be because you were chosen. And chosen people don't receive blessings by merit. They receive them by divine decree. One move from God can shift the seasons so dramatically that everything you once lacked suddenly becomes abundant. Everything that hurt you begins to heal, and everything that was denied begins to pursue you. There are moments in life when all your striving comes to an end and grace takes over. Not because you gave up, but because heaven stepped in. God allows you to try in your own strength just long enough to realize that the breakthrough isn't in your hands. It's in his. That's why he waits until you've exhausted all your options, until your plans fall apart, until your strength runs dry, so that when he moves, you will know without question that it was him and him alone. It's in those moments of surrender that his glory shines the brightest. The reason one divine move can erase years of struggle is because God is not just restoring what you lost, he's repaying what was stolen. He doesn't just return what the enemy took, he multiplies it. He doesn't just bring you back to where you started, he takes you further than you ever imagined. That's why the blessing takes time, because it's being built with interest. The years you cried, the seasons you felt forgotten, the times you were overlooked, God was counting every moment. And when he moves, his compensation is not measured by earthly standards. He rewards according to what was promised, not just what was endured. There are people who will look at your life after God's sudden move and be confused. They'll wonder how you rose so fast, how doors opened so quickly, how things turned around so drastically. They won't know the depth of the struggle, the pain of the process, the weight of the waiting. They'll only see the outcome and they'll assume it was luck or timing or connection. But you'll know the truth. It was the hand of God. It was grace, unexplainable favor, divine orchestration beyond human reasoning. What one divine move does is it not only shifts your circumstances, it resets the entire narrative of your life. It changes the lens through which people view you. It redefines your identity, upgrades your influence, and magnifies your purpose. Suddenly, you're not the person who was left out. You're the one chosen. You're not the rejected. You're the redeemed. You're not the one who failed. You're the one who overcame. One move from God has the power to realign your destiny and place you in rooms your background said you'd never enter. There's something powerful about knowing that your struggle wasn't wasted. That every night you cried, every moment you kept going when it didn't make sense, every act of obedience you followed through on, it was all seen by God. And when he moves, he doesn't just move to reward you. He moves to restore honor to your name. He moves to silence the voices that mocked you. He moves to show that his word over your life was true all along, even when the evidence said otherwise. Sometimes we think God's blessings will be gradual, but often they come like a flood. One move can open doors, heal relationships, bring divine connections, unlock gifts, and release answers you've been praying for. And when that happens, you'll realize why it took so long, because the blessing had to be this big. It had to come in such a way that no one else could take credit. It had to be overwhelming to make up for everything that tried to destroy you. So hold on, because you are one divine move away from everything changing. One touch from God can reverse every verdict spoken against you. One whisper from heaven can shift the winds in your favor. One act of divine intervention can lift you out of the valley and place you on the mountain. And when it happens, you'll look back and understand that what felt like years of silence was actually the preparation for a moment of power. What took time to break you, God will replace in an instant. Because when He moves, He doesn't need help. He just needs the moment. Everything that has been shaking in your life is not happening by accident. The disruptions, the delays, the detours, and the disappointments, they all carry meaning beyond what your natural eyes can see. When things begin to shake, when foundations you once relied on start to crumble, it's often a sign that heaven is rearranging something deep within your story. God does not allow shaking to destroy you, He allows it to awaken you. The shaking is not punishment, it's preparation. It's an indication that something greater is on its way, and what no longer serves your purpose must be removed to make room for it. We often resist the shaking because it feels uncomfortable. It challenges what we've known, unsettles what we've built, and breaks our dependency on what we assumed was stable. But God is not interested in temporary comfort. He's after lasting transformation. When He begins to shake your life, He's loosening the grip of what has kept you bound, shifting you out of routines that have become cages, and separating you from people, habits, and environments that cannot travel with you into the next level. The shaking comes first, not to break you down, but to break you free. God's divine shakeups are spiritual earthquakes designed to collapse everything that was built on fear, pride, self-sufficiency, and insecurity. Because what you're about to carry, where you're about to go, and what you're about to walk into requires a new structure. You can't put a new calling on an old foundation. You can't hold a fresh anointing with old thinking. So when everything seems like it's falling apart, it could actually be falling into place. The people who left, the opportunities that dried up, the doors that didn't open, it's all part of the cleansing. And God will shake what you think you need until you realize He is all you need. The shaking comes to wake you up. Sometimes we get too comfortable in situations that limit us. We settle into environments that look peaceful on the outside, but are spiritually paralyzing on the inside. God loves us too much to let us stay stuck in smallness. So He begins to disturb the calm. He removes the false sense of security and starts shaking what you leaned on, so you'll shift your weight back to Him. He'll rattle your plans to protect His purpose. He'll unsettle your comfort to activate your calling. It's not cruelty, it's divine care, because the longer you stay rooted in what's familiar, the more you delay what's been destined. The shaking also reveals who's really with you. When your world starts shifting, when the applause dies down, and when the benefits are gone, that's when true loyalty shows up. God will allow the shaking to expose hearts. It's in the shaking that the pretenders flee and the faithful stay. It's in the shaking that your spiritual discernment sharpens. You begin to see beyond the surface. You realize some connections were for your old season, not your next one. And the ones who stay, the ones who weather the shaking with you, those are the ones God has assigned to your destiny journey. Every shaking serves a spiritual purpose. For some is to release them from what they've outgrown. For others is to push them into what they've been afraid to embrace. The discomfort you feel is not the enemy winning. It's God stretching you for what you prayed for. You asked Him for increase, for purpose, for clarity, for promotion. But increase requires space. Purpose requires pruning. Clarity requires confrontation, and promotion requires elevation, which often comes through separation. That's why things are shaking. That's why life is shifting. You are being positioned, even in the pain, for something far greater than you can imagine. When God shakes your life, He's also breaking every lie that told you you'd never rise again. He's disrupting every demonic whisper that said you're not enough, that your time has passed, that your mistake disqualified you. The shaking silences those voices because it's proof that God is still working. He doesn't shake what He has abandoned. He shakes what He's about to use. He stirs what He's about to elevate. You are not being destroyed. You are being prepared. What's shaking around you is nothing compared to the glory that's rising within you. So let the shaking do its work. Let it strip what was false. Let it reveal what was hidden. Let it expose what was weak. because after the shaking comes the settling, and what remains after the dust clears will be stronger, purer, and more aligned with heaven. Your faith will be deeper, your focus will be sharper, your spirit will be lighter. You'll no longer cling to what used to hold you. You'll step into what now empowers you. The shaking is not your ending. It is the evidence that the shift has already begun. There are moments in life when God seems silent, when prayers seem to echo into empty space, when doors remain shut no matter how much you knock. You look for signs, for confirmation, for reassurance that you're still on the right path, but all you're met with is stillness. And in that stillness, the mind begins to wander. Doubt creeps in, and the heart begins to whisper questions it never dared ask before. But here's the truth that silence often conceals. When God is quiet, he's not absent. He's deeply at work. Heaven's silence is never without purpose. When God is not speaking, he's usually building. You may not hear his voice, but his hand is moving. You may not feel his presence in the way you once did, but he's closer than ever. In fact, it's in the silence that some of the most profound shifts take place. God doesn't need to explain himself to accomplish his plan. He doesn't need to give you a daily update for progress to be unfolding. Silence is often his sanctuary of preparation, a holy pause before a powerful release. Think of a seed planted in the soil. Once it's buried, everything goes dark. There is no sign of movement above the ground, but within the soil, transformation begins. Roots stretch downward, the shell breaks open, and life begins to form where no eye can see. That seed isn't dead, it's developing. And just like that, God often hides his work in silence so that when the breakthrough comes, it's stronger than anyone expected. What looks like nothing happening is actually the deepest kind of preparation happening. God's silence is also a test of trust. When you don't feel him, will you still follow him? When you can't trace his hand, will you still believe in his heart? When you don't see results, will you still walk in obedience? These are the moments that separate shallow belief from true faith. Anyone can worship in a room full of miracles, but it takes unwavering faith to worship in the silence, to praise in the dark, to hold on when nothing around you affirms the promise. The silence is where loyalty is proven. It's where character is forged. It's where spiritual maturity is born. And while it may feel like God is withholding something from you, the truth is that he's actually protecting something for you. Some blessings are too big to be rushed. Some answers are too sacred to be shared prematurely. If he gave it to you too soon, you might mishandle it, misplace it, or misunderstand it. So he waits. He hides it. He wraps it in silence, not as a punishment, but as preservation. He's building not just what you asked for, but also who you need to become in order to handle it well. The silence is also a sifting season. It reveals the intentions of your heart. Are you seeking the blessing more than the one who blesses? Are you chasing results, or are you pursuing relationship? When God seems distant, it draws out your true desire. If your heart still says yes, even in the absence of reward, you're ready for the kind of elevation that cannot be shaken by applause or approval. You become rooted not in what God does, but in who he is. And that kind of faith is unshakable. That kind of faith is the foundation upon which he builds great things. When God is quiet, the enemy gets loud. The enemy loves to speak lies into silence. He will twist the delay into a narrative of rejection. He will try to convince you that the silence means abandonment. But you must learn to discern the difference between God's voice and the enemy's noise. Just because heaven is still doesn't mean hell is winning. In fact, it usually means hell is trembling because it senses what's coming next. The enemy always attacks most violently before God's greatest moves. So if you're in a silent season, don't assume it's because you're off course. It could be the very opposite. You're so close to the shift that heaven is holding its breath, waiting to unveil what's been growing in the dark. Eventually, the silence will break. And when it does, what comes next will make sense of every sleepless night, every tear, every lonely moment you endured in faith. You will realize that God wasn't ignoring you. He was investing in you. He wasn't punishing you. He was preparing you. His silence was never a void. It was the sacred space where glory was being cultivated. He doesn't stay silent forever, but when he finally speaks, it shifts everything. It realigns the atmosphere. It restores what was lost. It reveals what was hidden, and it releases what was delayed. So if you're walking through that silent place now, don't run from it. Lean into it. Trust that what you can't see is more real than what you can. The silence isn't the end of your story. It's the pause before the promise. It's the quiet before the crescendo. It's the moment where God's greatest work takes root before the world ever sees the fruit. And when the time is right, the silence will turn into a sound of fulfillment, of answered prayers, of divine arrival. And you'll know it wasn't that God wasn't speaking. It was that he was building something worth waiting for. There's something profoundly powerful about the way God chooses to move in your life, not in isolation, but in full view of those who once overlooked you, doubted you, or even worked against you. When God decides it's time to elevate you, he doesn't do it in the shadows. He prepares a table for you in the presence of those who said you'd never make it. He doesn't just bless you quietly, he blesses you publicly. That kind of divine move isn't about revenge, it's about recognition. It's not about proving people wrong, it's about proving that he was always right about you. God is intentional about the setting of your breakthrough. He knows the rooms where you were once dismissed. He knows the circles that called you unqualified, the voices that said you didn't have what it takes, the systems that blocked your access. And instead of removing you from the memory of those spaces, he plants you right in the middle of them and blesses you there. Because when God moves, he not only lifts you, he rewrites the entire narrative that tried to define you. He turns your life into a message that can't be silenced, a testimony that can't be denied. What's amazing is that he does it without your striving. You don't have to force your way in. You don't have to prove yourself to people who never saw you. When God moves, it's not your name on your resume that gets noticed. It's his favor on your life. His blessing becomes undeniable. The same people who ignored you are suddenly inspired by you. The ones who shut the door on you have to watch as new doors swing open without effort. And in that moment, it becomes clear to everyone around that what is happening in your life isn't man-made. It's divinely orchestrated. Sometimes God will allow you to remain hidden on purpose, not because you're not ready, but because they're not ready to see what you carry. He'll keep you in a place of obscurity until the appointed time. But once that moment arrives, once heaven releases the word, nothing and no one can delay it. And when he brings you out, he does it in such a way that even your enemies become witnesses to his faithfulness. The platform he gives you becomes the evidence of your process. It becomes the stage for his glory, not your ego. It's important to understand that this public blessing is not just for applause, it's for impact. When God elevates you, it's because he wants to use your story to shift atmospheres, to change lives, to ignite faith in others. There are people who need to see how you overcame, how you rose, how you stayed faithful when it made no sense to do so. Your journey becomes a living letter of hope to someone else walking through a valley. So when he blesses you in front of others, it's not to boast, it's to inspire, it's to reflect his goodness in a way that can't be ignored. And let's be honest, there's something healing about being blessed in the same space where you were once broken. There's something redemptive about receiving honor in the same environment where you were once shamed. God is a redeemer not just of people, but of places. He restores more than just your position. He restores your dignity, your voice, your identity. And he does it in full view so that the story can't be twisted, so that even those who hurt you have to admit, God did this. You don't have to seek validation from people when you walk with God. His favor brings a kind of visibility that doesn't come from marketing, networking, or self-promotion. It comes from divine timing. And when he brings you into that moment, everything aligns. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify your elevation. The fruit of what he's done will speak louder than any rumor, any lie, or any misunderstanding ever could. The favor will be evident. The transformation will be undeniable. That's why you had to endure the quiet seasons. That's why you had to walk through the fire. That's why you were tested in private, because when the shift comes, God doesn't just want to bless you. He wants to establish you. He wants to make it clear that you didn't arrive by chance. You were shaped for this, molded for this, processed and pruned for this. And now the stage is set for the unveiling of His work in you. When God blesses you in front of everyone, He's not just doing it for your benefit. He's doing it to show that He still raises the humble, still rewards the faithful, and still keeps His promises. He's doing it to demonstrate that obedience is never wasted, and that even when people forget your name, heaven never does. And so, when that moment comes, and it will come, stand tall, not in pride, but in gratitude, because you'll know the truth. You didn't make it by power or might, but by the Spirit of the living God, who chose to turn your life into a sign of what only He can do. There comes a point in your journey where you must stop expecting ordinary. You must release the idea that God's next move in your life will be predictable, familiar, or explainable. Because the truth is, what God is about to do in you, through you, and for you will not fit inside the box of your previous experiences.